Today I'm talking about what the outcome is for the 20,000 kilometer service. And the one issue about riding off-road that people complain about this bike is that it's a little bit heavy. So I'm going to show you the easiest way that you can knock a few pounds off this bike and upgrade it at the same time. So stick with me in this video and I'll tell you everything about my experience with the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 after 20,000 kilometers. Hi, my name's Peter. I like motorcycles and motorcycle camping. This is my 2025 Royal Enfield Himalayan 450. I've had it for about a year and a half now. If you've been watching my channel, you've seen me do quite a lot of adventures on it. And I've just had it in for the 20,000 kilometer service. So I want to tell you about how it's held up in a year and a half of pretty steady riding, some of it challenging, some of it pretty ordinary. Yeah, this has been a great bike. I use it for basically three purposes. I use it at my daily rider. It's the only bike I own right now. So I use it for commuting, grocery shopping, running errands. We also own a car between me and my wife, but this is my primary form of transport year-round. Fortunately, living on the west coast of British Columbia, I can ride 12 months a year. Maybe not every day, but certainly every month. I also used it to ride to Alaska and back. So as a touring bike, I'm going to admit that it falls short. I'm going to do a video on how it is as a touring bike. It's not bad. It can handle everything. It can be a long distance bike. And certainly the Fuzzy Biker has got, I don't know, 10 times as many kilometers on his bike as I have on mine. So, but as a touring bike, there are times when I want a little more power, maybe even a little better wind protection, but um, it can do it. It did fine. Rode to Alaska. I have the rally seat on, and the rally seat is not made for comfort, but is made for better standing. I like it a lot, and I don't think I would want to go back to the regular seat. I like it because I'm tall and I can shift back and forth. It gives me more riding positions. And the other thing that I like to use it for is for doing some, I'm calling it off-road, but if you're really specific, it's about riding logging roads, riding roads that are unused, but you know, not a single track so much as double track and former logging roads. So including the Roadbook Rally on Vancouver Island, which I just completed. So you can see, I'll put a video link to the Roadbook Rally right here. Today I'm talking about what the outcome is for the 20,000 kilometer service, what repairs were needed. There were a couple of things wrong with the bike that the mechanic caught, so it's a good thing to have a professional mechanic take a look at it once in a while. I had done all the other maintenance on my own except for the 10,000 kilometer service because I don't feel competent to do the valve check. And the one issue about riding off-road that people complain about this bike is that it's a little bit heavy. So I'm going to show you the easiest way that you can knock a few pounds off this bike and upgrade it at the same time. So stick with me in this video and I'll tell you everything about my experience with the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 after 20,000 kilometers. I have my notes from the mechanic, and let's get to the most important thing that I went to the mechanic for was to get the valve checks done. And in the 10,000 kilometer service, only one of the valves needed adjustment. In the 20,000 kilometer service, both valves needed adjustment, but they weren't that far off. So here's the thing about compared to some other bikes, like the Honda, uses a different system for the valves. So the Royal Enfield Himalayan Sherpa engine uses shims in the valves, which means that the valves tend to set in over time. So the first service with the valves is 10,000, the second service is 20,000, and now the valves don't need to be checked again for another 20,000. So at 40,000, we'll look at them again. So what the mechanic found was the intake valve was at 004 instead of 006. So that's 002 out instead of 001 out. And the exhaust was 008 instead of 01. So that's another 002 out. So it's not like wildly out, but it's just a little bit out of spec. and that's why it's good to check and have somebody, if you know how to do it, that's fine. It's beyond my capacity as a mechanic. And just, there's just a few things that I realized that taking it to the mechanic was important for me. So I like to have my bike at a professional mechanic at least once a year. Um, so, so he redid the valves, and that's great, and I didn't notice anything. But here's the other thing, right? I asked them to check the brakes. I had changed the brake pads on the rear. That was fine. But what he noticed was that the brake fluid was dark, possibly contaminated with water. So he changed the brake fluid. And that's something that I hadn't checked. And I'm not as familiar with what the brake fluid should look like, but I know that you have to change it every once in a while. He says every 2 years. So we're at a year and a half, but I have more than a typical year and a half's worth of riding on this bike. And how could water have gotten in there? Well, use your own judgment. But I certainly rode with some water when I was with the Fuzzy Biker riding to Alaska. I've ridden off-road. I've gone through a lot of puddles. I've certainly exposed this bike to plenty of water. Okay, so that was one thing. Another thing that he noticed was that the back wheel was a little bit out of alignment. And to be honest, I find that difficult. I had the back wheel off recently, changed the chain, changed the sprockets. If this is something that people should know how to do on their own, but the there are these little alignment lines in here with markers. I just find it really difficult to see and make sure that it's aligned perfectly. So I have a little tool that fits on the chain, and it has a little pointer that sticks on there, and that's one of the ways that I know that I've got it aligned up properly. But again, it needs to be really in alignment. If it's out of alignment, that wears your tire and it affects the handling, and that's a safety factor. So it was a good thing to have the mechanic check on that. And the one other thing that the mechanic caught, which is hard to notice on your own, is that my front brake wasn't activating the brake lights. And I don't know how long this has been going on, but he replaced, there's a little sensor in there, and that sensor wasn't working. So that's the one failure that I've had at 20,000 kilometers as a part that shouldn't have worn out. I'm going to check with Royal Enfield about if I can get that covered under warranty, but it may be too late now. Anyway, so that was not an expensive part. Everything else that I've had to deal with this bike has been normal wear and tear. Gone through 2 sets of tires. I've gone through a chain and sprocket. So I've been changing the oil about every 5,000 kilometers, even though the manual calls for every 10,000. So that's just me being a little bit paranoid, and I think clean oil never hurts, especially if you're doing a lot of off-road riding or riding on dirt roads, gravel roads where you pick up dust and dirt gets in there. The daily wear and tear. Certainly riding in the winter means that you're going to draw cold, moist air into the engine, and there's condensation, so you get some water in there. You can't avoid that. So I like to change the oil in the spring under any circumstance. The number one way to upgrade your bike and to lose weight is to replace the lead acid battery with a lithium battery. So I've been supplied this battery from TYKOOL. They sent it to me for evaluation. I weighed it. Okay, now here's our lithium battery, and it weighs 1.14. 1 pound, 14 ounces, 14.3 ounces. 1 pound, 14.3 ounces. This is a precise high-tech object. It has built-in voltmeter, 13.3. If you put your bike on a trickle charge in the winter, you have to make sure that you have the correct lithium type of charge, because you don't charge this with the same old charger that charges your lead acid battery. Don't ask me how I know that, but you'll have a battery that's permanently shut down, and that's not a good thing. So for proper long life of your battery, only charge it on the bike or with a proper charger that has the charge set up for a lithium battery. Otherwise, it'll overcharge it, it'll shut down permanently, and you're going to have a 1 pound piece of paperweight. So that is significantly lighter than the lead acid battery that comes with the bike. Here's the Royal Enfield OEM battery. So 7 pounds, 8 ounces. If you don't know how to change a battery, then this should be like your very, very first lesson. I'm not a mechanic, like I said, and but the battery is so easy, so easy. All we have to do is remove the seat, okay, and our battery is right here. I've got a few extra things attached to the battery that makes it a little more complicated, but okay, there's two 10mm bolts here, so we just have to remove those and any attachments. And unless you've attached something extra, then there's only going to be the one. Now, you're going to have to reset your clock after this. Remove the red one first because that's the power one. Now there's only ground. Make sure that this doesn't touch anything. And now you can remove the black one. Okay, so that's everything disconnected from the battery. The battery has a little tab, a little rubber tab that holds it down. I find this to be one of the harder things. There, that goes down, and that just slides out. Now this, if you hold these two like this, yeah, like what a difference, what a difference. Okay, now this is the important part about getting the right, make sure you get the right battery for your Royal Enfield Himalayan because it has to fit in. This is a pretty tight space in here, right? And it just slides right back in where the original was. And that's perfect. Comes with a little package of nuts. There's 1, 2, 3, so I guess they give you a spare. These are a pretty standard size anyways, so I usually have a few extras around. Okay, you don't want to strip it, but you do want to make sure that you have a nice tight connection. All right, so there, that's all I need. Everything is nice and tidy in there. And okay, and now with the new battery in, look at that. I'd like to thank Harrison at Coastal Motorcycle Repair for the fabulous service. I know that some people are going to ask about the price, and I'll tell you that the original estimate for the 20,000 kilometer service, including the valve check, was about $500 Canadian. And the repair, the replacement of the brake switch, the relay, added another $220 for that parts and labor. And so the total was $720, including taxes. And I'm pretty happy with that. The bike is running great. I'm looking forward to another 20 or 30 or even 40,000 kilometers on this bike. I don't know. I'll never catch up with the fuzzy biker, but I got a lot of great riding to do on this bike. So I'll see you around. I'm heading out on another camping trip in a couple of days, so I'll get some video on that. I hope you can stick around and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one.